Okay, so if you think back over the last four episodes, we've looked at Commodore, we've looked at the 64 in particular, we've looked at the ZX Spectrum, we've looked at
Amstrad, we've looked at the Micro.
The Micro, great. So we've covered quite a few of the big contenders in the 8-bit arena. But we've talked about all of those companies a little bit all over the place. We've had different dates firing around, and now we just want to show you on screen a nice little timeline of what it all looks like. The 8-bit era, let's call it the era, it actually goes from around about 1977 to 1992. That, I would say, is the whole era of 8-bit. There were some early computers just before then, but they really weren't commercially successful. They were more for hobbyists, a lot of them were kits that you built yourself. So yes, it lasted for about 15 years, but if we have a quick look at that breakdown, we'll see that the golden age is only about 4 or 5 years long. So let's just see, can you tell me what you know of the really early stage of 8-bit computing?
What I know of the really early stage, I know that the golden era, probably for what I think it would be, probably started in 1982 that the Commodore and Sinclair came out.
Yeah, good. Well, remember, they're key dates that we need to remember. But if I said to you things like the Commodore PET, have you heard of that?
I've heard of it, I don't know when it came out though.
That was 1977. In 1979, I think, we had the Atari 400 and 800 personal computers. There were early Sinclairs like the ZX80, which I think was in 1980, and the VIC-20 Commodore. There's a couple of others. There's actually manufacturers that we haven't talked about as well. There's things like Dragon down in Swansea, and let's think TI, Texas Instruments they were called in America. So there's a few that maybe another series we can look at in a bit more detail. But there were these early computers that, frankly, the games are really not that good on them. They're like early attempts for a mass market appeal. And then the Micro appeared. Do you know what year the Micro appeared? The BBC Micro?
The BBC Micro. I remember there was two versions, wasn't there? An A version and a B version.
Mm-hmm.
The A version came out, I think, in 1981.
Great.
I remember it being just before the Commodore and Sinclair.
Which came out in
1982.
Yeah, Spectrum and Commodore 64, 1982.
Yeah. And I think the B was, I can't remember, it's either 1985 or 84.
Yeah, it was 1985, fantastic. And in 1984 we had the Amstrad CPC. So Amstrad and the B series, which was the proper BBC Micro really, they were a little bit late to the party. But that 1981 to 1985, that's the golden era. Late in 1985 to 1987, you started to see Atari ST arrive.
16-bits.
16-bit computers. There was the Atari and the Amiga computers. So they started to sort of ring the death knell for the 8-bit computer. However, it didn't stop there. We know that Amstrad went on to produce their Plus computers. They also did those Sinclair Spectrum computers as well, but under Amstrad manufacture. Indeed, our one was from later in the decade. And then there were the consoles that they all tried as well. So, for example, the Commodore. Do you remember what the Commodore console was called?
I'm not sure. I remember it didn't do very well though.
No, it's called the Game Station. From memory, that's the one where they shipped 20,000 units, so they made 20,000.
And then they only sell like 1,000.
2,000. They sold 10% of them. And just to show you how quickly they were just throwing that together and chucking it out to try and make money, if you bought some of the games cartridges, they would say they were compatible with the game system. So Terminator is a good example of this. You'd put the games cartridge into the console, you'd have a joystick because that's all that came with the console, and the first thing it would say on the title screen is press any key. And you didn't have a keyboard, so you couldn't press a key to start the game. So I can't imagine that happening today. I think that, slightly Wild West era of the 1980s. So yeah, that kind of paints the timeline. I hope that's useful for helping you to piece it all together in a nice way. Next we're going to go on to how does it work, and we're going to have a little look at those big chunky televisions called CRTs.